Hello and welcome to the zoo. Today we're going to talk about shadow IT. It's the nightmare of any IT worker and it's the happy dream of most business units. But what is it and what benefit does it bring? I'm Alpha Bohaile, and with me is Chris Rickson and Jeff Maloney, and together we're going to solve this mystery. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to it. This is one of my favorite topics.
Oh, I know. Chris is going to explain why shadow IT is actually good for companies. And Jeff Maloney down in LA is going to be on the other side of the fence, explaining why too much shadow IT is too shadowy.
Yes, follow IT's rules. They're there for a reason.
There you go. Let's start with a definition of shadow IT, and that is bring your own device gone amok. I'm going to give an example here at BMC Software. We all work. When we started, we came in through an acquisition. We did mobile software for Remedy, and we needed to set up a server so people could download the trial app on iTunes. The company said they're going to take 6 months, considering the security protocol that the servers have to go through before this can come up. That afternoon, the server was up, but it sat on Amazon's cloud. That was good. That was bad. We did something behind someone's back. That was truly shadow IT, if you will. Chris, is this inevitable? Is this where we're heading?
Yeah, I think it's not only where we're heading, I think it's where we are. I think it is the democratization of technology. It's affordable, it's easier to use than it's ever been. Tremendous power, it's the reach of people who traditionally would have needed some kind of technical education. I think so the technology is abstracted for us now that actually it's a very safe thing to put tremendous power on people. And by which I mean everything from, like, almost everything I'm using, and including this terrible connection, I think it spans everything from personal equipment right the way through to business units who are empowered to go and buy the right solution for them. Very, very straightforwardly with technology that's easy to grasp and understand. So I think that technology has made this inevitable by simplifying almost everything, including abstracting away the need to even host it, by the way, right? So clearly these days someone else can even do that for you. So I think it's inevitable. I think it's hugely empowering.
But how do you empower a business unit or a team or an individual to say you have the right to go and purchase software or spin up an instance in the cloud, bring in your own devices, when those individuals, in theory, are not experts like we have in IT that know security and compliancy and risk and et cetera? So how do you define a set of rules that says so-and-so can do this with IT and so-and-so cannot do this with IT?
Well, I think that is part of really what it means to run enterprise technology right now. I think traditional patterns of deployment have shifted so much that we think very, very carefully about the rigidity of some of those historic IT rules. So if it's the case that a third party is willing to underwrite a lot of that risk for you and business continuity, take the major cloud application vendors with whom we partner and are huge advocates of, if they're willing to underwrite a huge amount of business risk, then we as an IT professional need to respond to that and understand that some of that risk has shifted away. So I think we need to relook at everything.
Does Salesforce.com do that now? Do they say, hey, we're going to take care of your compliance? Or is this still my headache if I'm the CIO using Salesforce.com, using them as one example?
Any cloud vendor really takes it upon themselves to provide rules and regulations and compliancy and uptime, et cetera, for when an individual or a company needs to go to that vendor to get some type of services. So, yeah, they definitely have to.
Another example is our phones. I want to use certain upgraded software. I always want to be on the latest software, but seldom does IT keep up. And this is to you, Jeff. you said stay, follow the rules are there for a reason. Yeah, but sometimes the rules are slowing down innovation. How can we make IT less bureaucratic? Can we? Is it inherent red tape in IT?
Well, it's the checks and balances is what IT is there for, right? And so Chris's argument is really you can hold back, and what you said, innovation, but really Chris is saying you're going to hold back business productivity by sort of having IT be the gatekeeper. And IT as the gatekeeper is obviously there for a reason, because there is a tremendous amount of risk if something goes wrong. There's every single week we hear emails got stolen, financial information got stolen, so and so got hacked, this government entity got hacked. So, and IT in theory is there to buffer that from those outside forces that could potentially do harm into a business or a vendor or whoever. How do you get around that? There's really no way of getting around that. It's really the reason why security comes about, so they can stop that. And do you want to lessen the security around an IT organization to be more productive? That's sort of what you have to weigh as you're running an organization.
Chris, what about security? Where does the scale of innovation and progressive movement versus security weigh?
Well, I think a lot of the innovation that we're seeing right now is in the cloud and in organizations who are able to bring a fearsome degree of security to the structured data centers. Described to me by someone with significant investment in a major cloud vendor that when they visited the data center, they came to realize very quickly that they couldn't even get close in terms of the high availability, integrity, security, every kind of physical virtual data security that was in place, and a whole bunch of other stuff as well, from a sort of compliance and recovery.
So the cloud vendors know better than internal IT. Sure.
They invest extremely heavily, and to a degree, if you've ever been to a major data center, obviously the security is impressive, body traps, eye scanners, all that kind of thing. If you go to a cloud vendor's facility, it's a whole level again. I think that it's a compelling argument, I believe, that it's good to invest in providers who give us that level of security. That doesn't negate businesses from making sure and being very careful about who they get into bed with from a technology point of view, educating the rest of the business and saying, hey, if you can put it in your pocket, to invest in systems outside of our purview, here's a few things that you need to understand and things you should be looking for from a contract point of view. So I'm very positive about it.
Jeff, the idea that IT is investing, that the vendors who are providing a better solution to internal IT are investing heavily in that. Is that the reason why IT is no longer holding the purse?
No, Chris's comments about how you can have just call them a cloud vendor, have a lot more security than what IT is managing on premise is spot on, simply because that is really the cloud vendor's responsibility, right? They have hordes of people making sure the systems are up and running in compliance, as less risk to the people that go to them for the service as possible, and they have 100 people staring at security, whereas a typical organization has, a small handful of people sort of managing this. It's just by the way businesses are run. So that's not the argument. The argument is you can't have any business entity go into all these various cloud vendors or spin up their own instances with some other third party or bring in their own devices. There has to be that checks and balances. There has to be that buffer, and IT needs to be that buffer. It's okay to go work with these other cloud vendors because they're obviously providing a tremendous amount of wealth within the organization or that unit that needs to go to them. But IT needs to be aware of that to understand what business units are going to cloud vendors so they can keep control of everything.
Yeah. What about this? I spoke to a very smart CIO at the IT Expo. Every time I talk to her, some kind of light goes on in my little head. She said they letting in shadow IT. They are sort of sneaking. They're fully aware what's happening, but instead of shutting it down, they're tracking it. So for example, they introduces Microsoft Link as the instant messenger. But they realize there are, Google and there's a bunch of other instant messengers that other people like to use for various reasons. They use it at home. That's where they have their whole database. It's easier, whatever the issue. And then they pick based on usage. So 40% of them uses Google's instant messenger. Well, instead of spending the ridiculous amount of money for Link, they then switch to that, or vice versa. People really like Link, and whatever the people want, we give them based on this type of open testing. Is that a working model, Chris?
I think it's a very pragmatic model. It suggests to me a progressive CIO has come to realize this whole business has become democratized, and the models of ownership and deployment have changed radically. And rather than fold our arms and gradually disappear into obscurity, why don't we very quickly relearn this function and understand the parts where we would really like to have at least some purview, and then understand the parts where actually a huge amount of flexibility can be given to employees. So it sounds to me like an early indication of what the future might look like.
Yeah, as long as I agree with that. I think that's the right thing to do. That takes time, and a lot these days with business landscape changing so quickly. Is IT given the time to run those, called a survey, to understand what is working well for the business, or are they being forced to do X, Y, and Z? So the big thing is, in my opinion, is just time. It's not necessarily a budget thing. Do you have the right visibility into everything, and do you have the time to make sure you're making to provide technology to the business?
Yeah, and I think that time and latency is the reason that the business is voting with its feet.
Yeah. Well, talking about time, we are out of it. Thank you so much, Chris and Jeff. For the rest of you, stay safe. Bye-bye.